We are a network of churches. We have some churches that are over 2 centuries old. We have others that haven't even celebrated their first birthday yet. We're multi-ethnic. We're diverse. We have churches meeting and worshiping in over 6 languages. We worship in beautiful, large sanctuaries, small auditoriums, rented school buildings, and in homes. As a group of churches, we are very diverse and growing. I'll be in a conversation sometimes with the local pastors whose church is not a part of our network. I always ask if they'd be interested in joining. Quite often the first thing they ask is, well, what's in it for us? Or what will we get from joining this network? In answering their questions, I do explain some of the benefits we can offer, but I also try to get into the bigger question of why it is important for churches to be networked. In a hyper-individualistic world, many churches out there try to go it alone when there's so much to be gained from being in a network. I find it interesting that from the very beginning of the first church planting movement, Paul spent much of his time and energy connecting churches together. Towards the end of most of his letters to churches, he dealt with networking issues like mutual support, sharing leadership resources, and kingdom accountability. Paul obviously saw this movement not as a bunch of individual churches, but as a network of mutually supporting churches. As a local network of churches in this region, we work toward providing these same benefits: mutual support, shared leadership resources, and kingdom accountability. In these few minutes, we would like to touch on each of these areas I just mentioned as we introduce to you our network of churches.
We value spending time and energy on equipping our churches. We do this in a number of ways, whether it's hosting conferences or starting leadership initiatives, providing resources, or also just blessing churches financially. An example of this is I spend a lot of my time pouring into our churches with resources on how to connect with their community. This looks like having a conversation about the demographics that makes up their community surrounding their church, and also how they can use the resources within their church to reach those that are outside of their church.
When I think of leadership resources, I think of a conversation I had with a woman in one of our churches. I had just spent 3 or 4 Sunday afternoons in their church, and I was doing this process I call clear vision to help churches understand where God has taken them in the future. And she comes up to me afterwards and shakes my hand, and she says, "I didn't even know people like you existed." Well, I wasn't sure what she meant by that, so I asked, and she said, "Well, I didn't know that someone had come and spent all this time with our church and yet do it for free." Well, I explained to her, well, it's not really for free. Your church belongs to a network of churches, and because of the mutual support of this network of churches, I'm able to come into the church and provide consultations just like this. Our staff literally works for our churches. That's what we do. We can honestly say with the Apostle Paul, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. By sharing our lives with these congregations, we were able to offer expertise, consulting, coaching, and mentoring for churches and for their leaders.
Our ultimate goal as a network of churches is for kingdom ministry to happen here on the peninsula in a way that reflects God's heavenly kingdom. We believe this is what we are called to do together as Christians and as a network of churches. We see this done in a lot of different ways and know that God directs this movement in a lot of different ways. Some of the ways in which we have seen kingdom ministry happen is through sports camp and work camp. This is where churches are connecting and impacting their community for Christ. Operation Inasmuch is another example. And this is where churches initiate kingdom ministry in their communities. There have also been several occasions where different groups and churches have gone on mission trips all over the U.S. and around the world. Another way is new church plants that are starting. They start in order to live out and be obedient to a calling from God for either a specific people group or community. In this, we always join hands in efforts that advance the kingdom and provide ministry in God's name.
This only happens when we partner together with the Holy Spirit in revitalizing churches, planting new churches, developing leaders, and teaching people to live missionally in their cultural context. We believe that this is what God has called us to do as a network of churches. If your church isn't currently involved in a local network of churches doing these sorts of things, we would love to have a conversation with you. Some might say, well, our church isn't Baptist. And our response is that though we are rooted in Baptist principles, we are a growing network of Baptist and non-Baptist churches working together for God's kingdom. If this sounds interesting to you, we would love to have that conversation and explore ways that we can grow God's kingdom together.